I'm Kazy, that property guy. Been buying, selling, holding property for the last 13, 14 years. I've done bits of everything. So I've done, from doing just straightforward refurbs and flips to residential conversions to small ground up schemes, commercial to residential schemes.
I think it'd be good for people on my channel to know your background and how you got started. Cool, guys. Back with not even another podcast, just a friendly chat.
It's like a fireside chat, right?
Yeah.
Just two lads, no coffee, didn't bring any resources.
No Gales today.
Yeah, but just having a chat.
Yeah, 100%. I think it'd be good for people on my channel to know your background and how you got started.
Yeah, no,
and where you are now.
So for sure. So hi, I'm Kazy, that property guy a lot of the time when we're out and about. Been buying, selling, holding property for the last 13, 14 years. So share my age. I've been doing it for a while. I've done bits of everything. So I've done, from doing just straightforward refurbs and flips to residential conversions, a few small ground up schemes, some commercial to residential schemes. Ran a rent to rent business for a while. So I've kind of done everything in property in terms of started like a lot of us just as an entrepreneur, sort of just trial and error with a few businesses. Found one that made a bit of money but just fell out of love with the business and wanted to have the stability of that kind of tangible, touchable asset. And that's sort of where I fell into property.
I didn't know you did rent to rent.
Yeah. But I didn't do rent to rent the way like most people do rent to rent as a gateway to get into property. I did rent to rent as a solution to, okay, so you started flipping property and you've made your first 30K, 50K, 100, whatever you make from your first deal. But if you're just doing that, you're living off your profits and you're never really going to grow. So the rent to rent I set up in about 2015 was more as a result of actually I need a cash flow in business alongside what I'm doing to give me like just a bit more stability, a bit more freedom until I built up the portfolio.
Yeah, I think rent to rent, I've always said is a good model if you are doing something else alongside it. I think a lot of people at the minute are jumping into rent to rent, jumping into management of rent to rent, and think that it's something that's making them super, super wealthy, which it can do. But
do you know what it is? Like some people do, like, like I said, I know loads of people that really struggle in rent to rent and still struggle even after being in it for maybe half a decade. And I know people that, are doing 7 figures a year in rent to rent. But I do think those that are really smashing it are more of the exception rather than the rule. And the reason is, and I sort of learned this, not the hard way, because I had a good time in rent to rent, but learned it through pain of doing, was that the idea that you're going to start taking on these properties, and then so you take on your first property and the standard sort of pitch is that, you're going to make £1,000 a month from your property, somewhere around that. But the reality is, like, for you to take on that first property, you pay a deposit. You generally have to tidy it up a little bit. So there's a light refurb. You have to furnish it. Now, maybe, particularly in the London market, you're 6 to 8 grand in. So if you've got a property that's making you £800 a month, it's 10 months before you've even broken even on maybe a 3 to 5 year contract. But after 10 months, if you want to go again, you've got to then now wait another 10 months until you've got 8 grand again to then get a second property. Realistically, if you don't start with a lot of capitals, when people say that, oh, you can just get into rent to rent with low money, if you want to really scale and make a sizable return, I do think you need capital if you want to actually get to a point where you're like making money, because the business constantly needs that cash flow to keep growing.
100%. I remember when I was speaking to a few people about it and I was looking at almost like the contracts that they had in place, like you say, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 year contracts that they've got under the rent to rent agreement. But after the first 12 months, there was always a break clause in pretty much most of them contracts. So obviously it gets scary when you're getting paid back after 10 months and you make 2 months of hopeful profit.
And even like from a contract perspective, because we when we had business partners at the time, and the way we looked at rent to rent was slightly different. We were looking at it from like a co-living space brand. Like we really wanted to go big and go, like we're talking thousands of units, like thousands and thousands of tenants. But when we were going to speak to, funders effectively about looking at funding, trying to really roll out this, I guess almost like a travel lodge model in terms of like, look, these are standard properties. Whether you're in Burnley, you're in Barnsley, you're in Blackpool, you're in wherever you are, you take a room from X company, it's going to look pretty similar, which is like what works for your, travel lodges and Premier Inns. It's just very standardized. You know what you're getting. You haven't got to worry about whether or not it's going to be clean. But when we went to go and speak to people about funding, they were looking at it and they were like, well, hang on a second. Yeah, you're saying you've got a business that's, got £1 million in revenue. But actually, from a contract perspective, all you have are contracts to say you are going to pay other people money that last for like 5 years. Your contracts for money inbound at ASTs for 6 months. If the market, goes completely left, you have all of these liabilities and actually very little assets. So I think it's a business that for loads of people has been life-changing and has really made significant changes. But I think my probably like big takeaway piece of advice is really run like your cash flow forecasting and see what that business is going to look like for you after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years. And actually, is it going to put you in a position that makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So what projects you got on at the minute?
So we're going to go and see, just had some interesting times. I've got a couple over in Fulham and then, which is Southwest London, and then one in West London and something over in Croydon. So we're going to go and see the more local ones to where we are. This was actually my first studio I ever did a podcast in. I'm having flashbacks of like, just panicking and being like, and now it's just, we could just chat with no prep.
Full circle.
But yeah, so I got, they were mostly stuff that we purchased at auction. A very typical model, and it's funny like because like in property you post something online and people are gonna say, that won't work. You're gonna see what that's like when whatever. And I always think to myself, I was like, the property that I just bought is a 1-bedroom flat that we converted to a 2-bedroom flat. The property that I first ever bought 14 years ago was a 1-bedroom flat that I converted to a 2-bedroom that was purchased at auction, a disposal from a housing association. And I think I say that to say like, you don't always have to reinvent the game. You don't always have to try something brand new and be like, oh, I saw these people doing that. If you can find something that you can do very well and start to really understand the market, it's a lot easier to exploit price mismatching because you really understand when something has been priced incorrectly.
That's your typical model, isn't it? 1-bed flat, move the... How would you configure that?
So there's two things, and I guess this is with flats, there's no permitted development, right? So no PD. So if you want to add a rear extension, a loft conversion, it's all going to be full planning. Also, if you want to do internal reconfigurations, 99% of flats are going to be on a leasehold or even share a freehold, which is the same thing, meaning that you're going to need consent from the freeholder to make internal changes. So typically, if you take like a typical kind of, masonette style, you generally come in, you have the living room at the front of the property. Then after that, you've got the next door, which will be the bedroom for the 1-bed. And then to the rear of the property, you normally have like quite a big corridor, which takes you out to a kitchen, like sort of mini kitchen diner style with a through, going to the bathroom at the rear is kind of like the really sort of old school style. But naturally, if you think about it now, how many of us want to walk through your kitchen in your towel? Like, it's not, it's a layout that doesn't really make sense.
Mate, we see them in so many like terraced houses in like Burnley and Aki. Yeah. It's like there's no bathroom upstairs. The bathroom's downstairs and it's behind the kitchen. It's
and like
what?
Old school is like from an efficiency perspective, right? Plumbing downstairs, pipe work out the way, back of the property, sense. That's where the drain is. Like builders is efficiently as possible. But if you're trying to create, in generally in London, don't sell anything for less than £500,000. So like it has to be nice because you're competing against the new build market with 2-bed, 2-bath, nice open plan kitchen, living room. So typically that layout that we spoke about, you would put the bathroom between the bedroom and between the living room. So in that space between the two, in most cases, that wall's just a partition wall. If it, is a supporting wall, then it's just, a steel, side to side. If you're in a terrace property, it's not too much of a big deal. And then So you end up still with a good sized bedroom at the front, 10 square meters, good sized bedroom at the rear, another 10 square meters plus, bathroom in the middle. You extract and just, drop the ceiling slightly. Then that entire rear of the property that was like a kind of big wasted corridor, that was the kitchen, that was the bathroom, now becomes your open plan kitchen, living room with direct access out onto the garden. Generally around sort of 20 square meters. So we look at properties that are sort of 55 square meters plus, and that's like our worst case scenario. I guess the worst case scenario is, for whatever reason, the freeholder says we don't like the idea of it, and we want to refuse your consent.
Have you ever had that?
No, not outright refused. I've had stuff where they've made it expensive for me, just by saying like, because the reasons people can use to refuse aren't that many. Like they can't unreasonably withhold your request. So like the easier ones to refuse it under would be stuff like stacking. So that's like, if you were to, for example, change the layout, so you've got a living room on top of a bedroom, they'd be like, well, it's going to cause a disturbance in the building. Yeah. But because we generally buy the ground floor flats, because, we just say, okay, we're going to do the insulation, we're going to now install 2, plaster boards to have like an hour fire protection as opposed to the old Latham plaster. You've got a lot more protection from noise, both impact and airborne sound. So don't really have issues. So worst case scenario though, it's like, okay, you just refurbish it as a 1-bed because we're still buying stock that's run down. Middle is, okay, you turn it to a 2-bed. So you don't add any square footage, but you increase the desirability of the property by adding a bedroom and having a better design. The third option is what I do more now, which is where we buy properties either on the ground floor or the top floor with the loft demised, and do either a rear extension or a loft conversion, converting it from a 1-bed at around maybe 350 to 400,000 pounds, that we've probably purchased for around, like depending on the area, maybe £600 a square foot, something sort of like that, maybe a little bit less, and basically increasing the value to something that we're selling at £1,000 plus a square foot.
Them prices are mad.
So
£1,000 a square foot.
So yeah, so literally that. So the one I'm going to take you to after this, purchase for 420,000. Again, we're doing a rear extension to add 20 square meters. We're probably going to add 300k worth of value, and of that, the build cost is around 100k. So you're adding 200k worth of value, but obviously you've still got to take into account you've got your cost of finance, stamp duty and other associated purchase costs.
That is crazy. What is your typical numbers? Like, because you sell everything, right?
Yes, I'm selling. So my thing is always, the outside of time, our biggest restriction is finance, is capital. So I don't do return on costs. I always do return on capital employed. For me, that's a more important number. If I was buying everything cash, then it's fine to do return on costs. But I always find it a bit strange that, for me, it's how much money do I have in this? Because what else could I do with the money? So I always typically look at minimum of 25%. But again, that would be like worst case if there's nothing sort of around. Like generally speaking, I'm probably operating on around 50% return on capital employed. So if between, for kind of sort of more, to give like a baseline idea for someone watching this, if we're buying for 400,000 and we're buying at 75% loan to value, that means 100k in for your deposit, circa 30k for your stamp duty, another 30k for your cost of finance, and 100k for the build cost. So give or take, you're all in for about 260,000. If I'm going down the route of having to go down full planning, that's extra risk. If I'm having to obviously get the consent for a license to alter, as opposed to somewhere that you're just refurbing or not even having to do a refurb, again, it's extra risk. So probably looking at, making 100k plus, that's probably like sort of 40 to 50% return on capital employed.
And why do you sell everything? Because we both agree on this.
Yeah.
I have a portfolio, but at the minute, all we're doing and all we'll probably do for the next 2 years is we're just trading at the minute.
So the reality is this, and if I give you those same examples of the numbers, right? You've got £260,000. That was like, if you're in a really blessed position, that's your starting capital. You've now just shown that in 6 months to a year, investing that money, you've made £130,000 like gross profit. There's obviously going to be taxes associated to it. But then other people will be like, oh, why don't you just keep it? You can refinance, you can get most of your money out. Even if you do get your money out, like this is a property that we're talking about in those numbers that's going to be worth 750, 800k. So you're leaving 200k in a deal. So even if only 70k of that is your own money and the rest of it is profit, you could take all of that money out and go again. And if you've just shown that you can make 120k, 130k from 260, what is the rationale behind saying, actually, I want to leave this as a buy to let, make £500 a month, 6k for the year? Your ROI now on that money has sunk, and yes, you don't have to do the work, but somebody still has to manage it. Boilers can still break down, things can still go wrong. And I'm of the opinion that, you know, these high yielding portfolios, they're always going to be around. Like, somebody's always going to need to sell one at some point. Get your cash in, and whether or not you choose to buy Bitcoin, you choose to invest in Tesla, you choose to buy a portfolio in Liverpool, you choose to buy somebody else's HMO portfolio, like, you know, your liquidity will allow you to buy what you want and get the best returns based on your position at the time. And I think a lot of the time holding on to property is just this like emotional attachment. I've done it, so I have to keep it.
I agree. I think most people...
We need to find something to disagree on.
I know, yeah, come on. I don't know what...
So this is the thing, like, I don't like anything that, like, so that's something that, like, why I flip is something that for some people is controversial, and the people disagree, but you agree. Your conversation around that you had that I found really interesting, I think rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way, was commercial valuations, and are they actually a lot of nonsense sometimes?
Yeah.
And I had to massively agree, like, because in isolation, a commercial evaluation amongst a mixed blend portfolio of single units and commercial, and it's just overall adds to your yield, is good. But in isolation, when you're valuing up houses for 500k, that because they're a 6 to 7 bed HMO all en suites, when the closest comparable on the road is 300k.
Yeah, tops.
Like, and you're at 75% loan to value.
And your tenant is a random geezer on a 12-month contract who you can't kick out.
There isn't the stability that you've got like that, you know, really great covenant on a Tesco's or, you know, a Subway, or someone who's going to be around indefinitely and is going to pay. And I think, look, it works now. It works at the current interest rates. It works because of the level of housing shortages, because people have become more accustomed to the shared accommodation, you know, way of living. But I just think nothing is indefinite, and if there is a shift in the market, there is a lot of exposure there. If effectively you're leveraged at 100%, over 100% of market value, and all of it comes from cash flow and positively.
I think as well, when you actually break the numbers, your wealth is decreasing. Like every one of those assets you buy, your wealth has literally gone down.
Why'd you say that?
Well, your net worth, sorry.
Yeah.
Because if the property's worth 300 grand and you've got a 335 grand loan against it, then you're negative 35 grand.
Yeah, and like, it's great. Look, don't get me wrong. From a cash flow perspective...
Oh, it's amazing.
It's amazing. But it's like, you know...
That's why I agree with some people that do it, because I know their backstory. I know they've sold companies. I know they have a big portfolio and they diversify into different assets. And I agree, because it's like, yeah, get the cash flow.
Yeah.
But when I look at
someone with like 6 units,
like
6
and
units,
like Greater Manchester,
over leveraged.
Greater Manchester, £1,000, like 750 to £1,000 for a room. You are 20 minutes outside the city centre, but then in the same breath, developers are in city centre of Manchester are building 800 HMO bedrooms in a skyscraper. So why would somebody not live in that and then go live outside of the city centre of Manchester? Like, it doesn't make sense, because the big developers will just come into the city, build everything, co-living, co-working, your own bedroom, you know, self-contained.
Yeah, they're going to add in the cinema, the
games room,
the swimming pool, the games room, paddle courts, everything. So
and I think that's where in 5 years' time there's going to be a big decline.
Yeah,
and I think stock.
And okay, let me ask you about this one, because you do some social housing stuff, right? Like, a lot of people like pitch social housing as like just a free money glitch.
I wish.
But you see it when you see it online, right? Like, social housing is positioned as basically, right, get a house, whether you buy the house or, you do like, rent to rent, get a house and then basically do nothing, and then you just get guaranteed rent that there's going to be no issues on, and you're going to get double the open market value just because X person, you don't even have like a social housing contract. You just know someone that knows someone that can get somebody else in. So you're doing rent to rent through like 3 different people. And for me, like the social housing, like the way it's positioned is like, oh yeah, but it's because, it's government, it's local authority. But then I look at it and I say, look, I've dealt with local authority. If they just turn around and be like, oh, something's gone wrong, we can't pay you for 6 weeks. That's like, it's your problem. If they turn around and say, you actually don't meet X regs because we got this complaint from this tenant, they're going to stop your payments, I think.
100%.
Okay, so we're just struggling to find something to disagree with.
I think
maybe we're just really clever.
I think we're the smart ones in the space.
Well, maybe it's that.
I think the interesting thing on the social housing front is there's 3 government contracts in the entire country: Serco, Mears and Clear Springs. Serco up north, Mears even further up north, and maybe a little bit all over, and Clear Springs are the guys down south. These guys have got the government contract to house asylum seekers. So these are the only 3. The rest are limited companies that are community interest companies, so CICs. These raise housing benefit claims from the council, and the council chooses or not whether they want to pay. Exactly what you were saying. We're owed over 100 grand in unpaid rent over the last 6 months through one of the councils that we work with, just because the tenants that went in as a referral from the council didn't tick a box to meet housing benefit claims. And like, when you've got a CIC in the middle, they're doing all of that stuff for you. Yeah. So if a CIC's been paying you for 6 months, and then after 6 months the council turns around and goes, this guy doesn't meet the housing benefit claim, housing providers just lost 6 months worth of cash flow. And then when you compound that over 1,000 units, that's why half of them go bust. Yeah. It's just it's a crazy space. Nothing's guaranteed in that space. Even if you're in with one of the government providers, you're not guaranteed, because there's break clauses, and everyone always says the property comes back in the same condition. I can tell you for a fact, it does not. Yeah. It doesn't.
Look, when I think we were at like, maybe, what was it? I don't know, maybe like sort of 400 rooms or something like that. And like, we had professional tenants. We had houses that were all nurses, like police officers, accountants, solicitors, architects. Even that, like, there's a lot of wear and tear because you're living in a room, like sometimes, or, even if it's, a house that's, rented out through social housing, it's going to have a lot more footfall. So I would just say this to say that, that in everything, that there's great ways to make money selling water on the side of the road. There's great ways to make money in social housing. But the idea that there's just this, the buzzwords that fly around for a little while, where it's like, for a while it was, for ages ago, it was just buy to let. Like, you do buy to let and you make money. Then it was you do BRRR, and it's like this thing that nobody's ever heard of. You buy social housing, and again, it's like, okay, you've got a social housing tenant. It's now the unlimited money glitch. But I think that the reality is that, the success comes from your ability to spot, a certain niche, and then be able to work it and just deal with the pressure and deal with the stress.
I think sticking to the fundamentals is massively underrated in property. Yeah. I always say buy well, raise finance if you don't have it, buy well, add value, get out. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to touch on was most people don't realise that even the big companies, they have a buy and sell cycle of like 3 to 5 years. You look at companies like BlackRock, Blackstone, all these big companies that buy, like, what's Blackstone's portfolio? It's like 550 billion. But these guys will buy, asset manage, increase the value of the asset, and they exit. Yes, they don't keep it. They don't sit on the rent roll.
They'll stabilize the asset, and then they'll sell them off to a different fund.
Exactly. So even these big guys, they don't sit and hold property for 20, 30 years to wait to get rich. They're constantly in, out, just so they can increase their capital pot.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's like, you have to be fluid. Like, I think the idea of like, this is what I do and this is me and this is who I identify as, it's a bit of a scary space, because it means now you just want to die on a hill of, once I've said this is what I do, I can't do anything else. But I think like one of the best ways to be successful in business is by being able to adapt and being like, oh, actually, this market's changed slightly. How can we pivot to work with the market? Because you can't go against, you know, the flow, the flow of the tide. Like, you're gonna have to go with it as opposed to against it, and just find your own way to navigate.
Sure. Most people watching this will probably know you from Instagram or YouTube and your podcast. How has your personal brand helped your, I guess, your property career, or maybe even like other opportunities and stuff?
Yeah, like, listen, like, even just randomly, just the most random things. Like, I was going to park somewhere the other day in like Knightsbridge, where it was like, there's no parking on the roads. I'm used to my car getting broken into, so I was like, I want to park in this car park. I was like, let me just chance it. I was like, I drove up and I was like, all right. And then the guy, like, older, like sort of guy from West Africa, was like, oh, just watching your podcast. And I was like, oh, do you think I can park? He's like, yeah, I've got a space for you, come in. And I was like, oh, this is almost like pretty privilege.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely from a, I guess, just introductory perspective, like, you know, going into rooms, people have an idea of who you are already, so you're not constantly having to prove yourself. It's like, that is your shop window. People now have an idea. You've established your brand awareness. It's still up to you to like make people like sort of know, like, and trust you beyond that. But definitely, like, in terms of every year that I'm like doing Instagram and I'm like, oh, I can't bother to like run up a video doing this, and then something will happen where I'll be like, oh, that was pretty cool, or that was pretty good. And whether it's financially, people just, you know, obviously I still go out there and find deals, what have you, but I get a lot of inbound, you know, inbound opportunities now, just because people, if I'm talking about, I always buy ground floor flats, and someone's like, oh, by the way, I know this, you know, one that's going to be perfect for you. If I talk about flat conversion, someone's like, oh, I've seen X, Y, or Z. So like, I'd say like every day I get sent, like, we're talking like 365 days a year, I get sent some type of opportunity. And now that obviously we've got the community, you know, even if I can't do it, can share that with other people. I think from a proof of concept perspective, like so my dad is my solicitor, and he's probably one of the people who uses it the most. Like, say like he's having an issue, he'll be like, oh, have you heard of Propertybykazy? Yeah, that's my client, that's my son. Like, and he'll just use it to kind of like get stuff streamlined sometimes, or, you know, get things done at a faster rate. But, you know, realistically, awareness is in business, in most cases, is everything. If people know who you are, if you can build a brand before you've walked in the door, it makes it a lot easier to do business.
100%. Right.
And do you know what else it is as well? Like, a lot of the time, right, even though like we do stuff that's like cool on socials and build like a decent sized platform, like in the grand scheme of property, we're like baby fish.
Oh, 100%.
Like we're tiny, like we're the minnows. But if you've got this USP of actually you've built this big personal brand, I can sit down with, like, you know, family offices and they want to do business with me on a normal day, as like based on my value in the property space versus theirs. It's like I would want to be sort of almost like, you know, hand out, like, you know, can I do some business? But you actually get your foot in the door because you've created your own value within the space.
I think people are interested in people that put themselves online as well.
Yeah,
like they actually just want to, like, even if it's someone from like a family office and they see you on Instagram, they'll be like, oh yeah, we're pretty, like, everyone's obviously following this guy and liking his stuff. It'd be pretty cool to meet him.
And like when they're like, oh, they've seen you, like they're actually proper, like you meet people and they're like, yeah, I've seen you, like I watch your stuff, and like you're at the, it's just like a really interesting level of actual genuine interest. But it's like, you know, the whole thing is, if you can get your foot in the door, that's your foot in. Now it's up to you to use your charisma, your ability, your sales skills to be able to close people to do business with you. But you kind of skip the first step of getting people to actually want to have that initial conversation.
Yeah. I had a mad interaction through my Instagram probably about 6 months ago now. Got a DM from first team player for United. Yeah. Currently plays in the first team.
Yeah.
Saying, can we meet for a coffee?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. Go on, mate.
Yeah.
So we met for a coffee and he was like, oh, I'm always at home. I've always got your YouTube videos on my TV, and my wife and my kids are just cooking.
Doesn't that throw your whole
like,
brain?
What?
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you just watching me? Like, this is bizarre, but they love it.
That literally, like, so I met the same like guys from Arsenal. And to be fair, like to be fair, no, there was like a first team player that I was talking to, a couple of them, but then he was like, "Oh, can you speak to this guy? Like, he's always talking about you in the changing room." Just like, so you lot are really just
Yeah.
big like Premier League players, like just having a chat about me. And it's like, but it's interesting because you're just putting stuff out there that you genuinely like, and I think that's why, like being just pretty genuine and being authentic, people can see that and they feel that. And I think I always relate it to music, like that. If you're gonna listen to some gangster rap, you want to feel like you're listening to a gangster. If you're gonna listen to some heartbreak, I want to feel like you're upset, like If I'm gonna listen to some house, I want to feel like those people was on drugs when they made it. Like you need to feel that it's like there's a level of authenticity in it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we got a couple more questions, mate. I'm trying to think of which the best ones here. How are you finding flips in a tough market? I agree with this question because I think the market's pretty tough at the minute, especially in London to exit on stock.
So do you know what's like? And again, like, been flipping, and like to be perfectly honest, probably in like the first property in like the last, maybe even potentially ever, I think I lost money on one deal. And I don't think I can blame the market for that. That was definitely me just being a bit like lack of due care and attention, and it's just another one easy without realizing there were a few parameters that are slightly different. Overall flipping, I think I'm generally converting, period properties, Edwardian, Victorian style properties, 100+ years old. There's not as many of those come into the market in tip-top condition, but because you're competing against all the new builds, you do have like a USP that most Victorians are either dated or, the new stuff is coming from a new build. So I think you do have like a small, very specific niche of somebody that wants exactly that. And I think just tailoring and really catering to who your kind of target demographic is really important. So like if I'm doing a 2-bedroom flat, uptown, 10 minutes from central London, and I'm thinking at the bathroom layout, I'm probably going to go luxury shower room over a bathroom, just because I think it's going to be a young couple, or a young professional that buys it as an individual, maybe that keeps a second room as a home office, going to have to do it to a really good standard. Obviously still budget accordingly, but if you do something to a good standard, because there's so much competition, you have to make sure that people fall in love with that property. So when something comes back on their home buyers survey, when another 5 properties come to market during the conveyancing process, they're still so stuck on your property that, you still hit the top end of your GDV. And I think this is a market where if you do it like bare minimum, like, you do your landlord style kitchen, basic, just white walls, magnolia, 6-panel doors, etc., and you just do the bare minimum, people are going to beat you down on price because they're like, well, it's comparable to like 10 other properties in the local vicinity. I'll just take whoever offers me the most discount. Versus if yours is head and shoulders above everything else and there's not really much competition, it's a lot easier to hit those price points. And as much as the market is difficult, like we had something that fell out of bed the other day at 750 odds. And I think the agents are telling me, look, you're really going to struggle to get this number again. We put it back on and we got 810, 4 offers over asking price, 800 within the first 3 days.
Our one in Kensington's struggling to sell.
What is it? I saw it.
2-bed flat. And we bought it incredibly well. Yeah. Like 2-bed flat, Kensington Mansions. Bought it at 495. And it's like sweet. Yeah. So like we just staged it, but I think maybe we wanted a bit too much, so we put it on at 650, tried to take a quick turn. The agent was just a nightmare, mate. The agent, so they were like, drop it to 600. We're like, what, 50 grand? Yeah. Like we've had like 20 viewings. We're like, we'll drop it to 625. Anyway, one of the guys we're doing a JV with rang the agent up and was like, tried to book a viewing to see what they were like on the phone. And the day we dropped it to 65, he rang the agent up and the agent said, oh yeah, no, it's dropping to 600 tomorrow. Just completely lied. Yeah. And so then we had to sack that agent, bring a new agent in, and now it's going really well. We've got a second viewing on it. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
What's the service charges like in it?
Pretty high.
That's the thing that kills about them.
Service charges are where a lot of the feedback has come.
That's the thing. Like, people don't realize, like, when you're thinking about it, it just, particularly in this market, like, it kills your buy-to-let market because it does your margins. If you got service charges of like £4,000 for the year, it's extra 300 and whatever it is, £60 a month. That might be half the margin on the buy-to-let. Like, so it absolutely kills the deal. Agents, I'm glad you touched on that, because we were speaking about it recently, and I was like, we spend so much like effort to create the perfect product, to buy right, to get the right contractors in, to arrange the finance to be at a good price point, to do all of your snagging, to stage your property beautifully, just to get like whatever agent is that, you know, you kind of like the sound of, like, or you're familiar with the name. And I think doing that due diligence on the overall process of not just what's the manager like that comes out and does the valuation, what's the office like, who are the people that are actually going to be selling it, how many do they have on their books, what's their sales progression strategy like, you know. So I think picking an agent in this market, that probably is one of the biggest and most important factors of actually a flip going well. Obviously you have to buy right and you have to create a good product, but I would massively, you know, advise anybody who's currently looking to exit something to dot the I's and cross the T's when it comes to picking a good agent.
Yeah, it's huge. We've got massive communal gardens. It's huge. Centre of Kensington, beautiful. We had a game in one bounce in it, actually, and got told off by some of the residents. But after 20 viewings, they asked for the gate code. We were like, what? You've not showed anyone the garden. Yeah. And then you've got to think of their motivation as well. Us reducing the price from 650 to 600 loses us 50k of our margin. Their fee goes down from 13k to 12k. Yeah. So, like, it's no skin off their nose.
And that's the thing where how you engage with your agent. So particularly when the agents walk in the door and say, yeah, guaranteed 650 all day, maybe 7. I look at them and say, oh, maybe 7. And they're saying, oh, but we want like our 2% fee or whatever we want. That's where you turn around to them and say, I'll make you a deal. If you sell it for over 650, I'll give you 3%. But if you sell it for like under 625, you know, it's 2%. If it goes under 6, we're talking 1%, because they've got to be incentivized as well to get you the most money. But I do think negotiations are really, it's important not to over negotiate as a property, you know, investor. I think sometimes we have our business hat on and they'll come out and they'll say, right, our fees 2%, and we want to fight them down to 1%. If they've got 21 beds on their listings and yours is a £6,000 fee and the rest of them are a 13,000 fee, and they make 70% of their income from commission, and they've got somebody that's maybe interested in both, every time they're going to dissuade them from your property. So I think you have to be smart when negotiating. Don't just negotiate for negotiating's sake, because sometimes you can win and still lose.
For sure. Let's leave it there, but last question. What is, I always get asked this, so that's why I wanted to ask it. What is for someone that's looking to get into property, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give? Quite a vague question, but...
So, do you know what? It's like a question you get asked every day. And I think I'm going to answer this question in a specific way. Like, the best piece of advice I would give is that as much as the things that you can do to prepare yourself, property investment a lot of the time is more of an art than a science. And what I mean by that is, like, you can have all of your formula and but every property is going to have its own intricacies, and you're going to have to work through the deal, whether that be rent to rent, whether that be development, whether that be ground up. You can't just take how the last deal worked and just try and copy and paste that into the next one. There's always going to be little areas that are going to move and shift. And like I use the example of, like, in London, the difference between a property on one side of the street versus another side could be 50 to £100,000. But that comes from understanding. It comes from actually looking at the deal rather than just being like, here's the spreadsheet, here's the price per square foot. It's going to make sense. So I just say, like, know your area, know your numbers, and, you know, buy at the right price, but always be willing to be sort of very dynamic when it comes to your strategy.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, mate.
Thank you.
Good to chat. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.